This is Father Vogel here as we go through St. Francis de Sales' introduction to the Devout Life. This wonderful work that is meant for just the regular person, regular ordinary person. So as we begin part one, if you recall, is for the purpose of giving us different counsels and exercises by which to move us from an initial desire to live the devout life to a total commitment within us to do so. So the first chapter of part one, Francis de Sales is going to first explain to us, what true devotion actually is. Because it's possible to get it wrong, and he wants us to make sure that we're on the proper path right away from the very beginning. So he explains that there are some false kinds of devotion. These are kinds in which somebody might appear on the outside to be holy, to be devout, but actually they have a long way to go yet. And sometimes we ourselves can fall into those things and believe that we've reached holiness when actually we have a long way to go yet. So he gives some examples of some false kinds of devotion. So he says, for example, let's say an individual is really good at fasting, and they spend much time doing great fasts for the Lord, for spiritual reasons. But he says at the same time they do that, they have deep hatred within their heart towards maybe someone or other people. That is false devotion. He says, or take the example of somebody who believes that they are devout because of the many prayers that they pray each day, that they say over and over and over again. But while they may say those holy words in prayer, the hurtful words that they say to their neighbors expose them for how far from perfection they really are. Or the example he gives of someone who very willingly gives alms, gives money to the poor, but at the same time will not forgive someone, has this unforgiveness within their heart. Or the opposite could be true. Maybe someone is very willing, ready to forgive everybody, but will hold back, refuses to give of what God has given to them for those in need. He says all these are examples of false devotions. And so we really need to evaluate ourselves as to, I may be really good in one area and think that I'm holy because of it. But there may be other areas in which I need to let go of something. I need to be converted to the Lord so that I may grow in devotion. True devotion, Francis says, is a true love for God that moves us to do good carefully, frequently, and promptly. So this is what true devotion is. It's a love for God, but it's a love for God that moves us to do good things carefully, frequently, and promptly. So he uses an analogy here to help us understand this. Analogy of birds. So he first starts with the ostrich. He says, well, the ostrich is a bird that never flies. You could see the ostrich as being like, the sinner who is weighed down by worldly things, and so never flies in the flight of holiness. And he says, but compare that with the hen. The hen can fly some kind of awkwardly at times, and he says, well, that's kind of like us too. When we're first starting out, we kind of awkwardly follow God. We're not very good at it. We don't always do it. But he says, those who are living true devotion, living the devout life, he says, those are like the eagle who soars above with a majestic air, who does it with such great ease and beauty. That's what it's like for us to live true devotion, for us to live the devout life that He wants to guide us into. In that, He says, we don't just live out the minimum that God asks of us, like just following the commandments. The 10 Commandments are really just the bare minimum of where we can go. But He says true devotion is this liveliness, this promptness in doing good, in doing charitable things, based upon listening to those promptings, those inspirations of God, of the Holy Spirit. He uses another analogy to explain this. The difference between somebody who's just recovering from illness and one who is in full health. So the one who is just recovering from illness, doesn't have all that much energy, is still trying to get back to normal, and so they can maybe even barely do the normal functionings, barely walk. Whereas the one who is in full health has the energy and vigor to be able to run. And that's what true devotion is all about. Being able to run the race, in a sense, as St. Paul will use that analogy in the scriptures. And a final image that he uses is that of a fire. At the beginnings, we have the fire of God's love within us. But true devotion is about a fire that has been stoked and is alive. Alive with the following of the Lord's inspirations. So, now that we know what true devotion is, we will continue in this first part as He will lead us and guide us to really desire even more greatly to live that kind of devotion through the course of our lives.